Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Rogue Wave Podcast, the frequency for all things pop culture and the disruptors behind it. We talk comics, movies, TV, and pop culture with the rogues who create it every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here. Facebook.com/WeAreRogueMatter, YouTube.com/RogueMatter. We're also on Twitch at We Are Rogue Matter and Twitter, Rogue_Matter. We take this fine video that myself and co-host Hassan Godwin put together and turn it into an audio file that will wow your ears. See, I've been working on this. And it's available on all major podcasting apps. Join the movement. Go rogue, roguematter.com. I'm your host, Michael Dolce, as always joined by my co-host in crime, the Lord of the Lateness himself. But he's not really late because he's here. He just was late to us getting here.
Mr. Late to the Godwin. Production meeting.
You know, you're yeah, that's like an inside joke tagline. See, folks.
It's too late now. It's too late to do anything about it now.
Well, no, you can change it right now. Go ahead. Change it to something exciting.
It's fine. I deserve to wear the monocle of shame.
Right Is it a monocle? Is that what it's called? The monocle?
Yes.
like
Aaron,
like the Planner's peanut monocle?
Aaron has rescued me.
Is that
yes? It's a monocle of shame.
Okay. Is it a monocle or monocle?
No, it's not a monocle.
Isn't it like the thing you wear in your eye, right?
Monocle. Why?
Google that.
All right.
Google that.
Do it on your own time.
All right.
What's next?
We have a great show. We managed to interview a very successful actress. She's been in a number of action films opposite some of the legends in movie history, including Bruce Willis, before he ended up having to retire due to medical reasons. Steven Seagal, Jason Momoa. She was also in a film with Danny Trejo from Machete fame as well too. Julia Klaas, which I got her name right, which was even better. I didn't butcher her name. So we've got an interview with her tonight.
You got Machete wrong. No.
What?
It's Machete.
Machete?
Yeah, not machete.
Like sachet? Like I have to say it with an accent of some kind?
It's Machete.
All right, I'm going to go with what it looks like on screen and say I did okay on that one. Possibly.
Hey, you call out your own wins. That's the way it's done in America.
I will vigorously defend my grammatically correct pronunciation of it. We've also got Stranger Things 4. I got a lot to talk about with that. So if you haven't seen it yet, Erin hasn't seen it yet, our producer extraordinaire. So she's got an hour and a half to go. So she's going to literally produce that segment with her ears closed. But we'll still try not to spoil it for her, but we will probably still end up spoiling it for her. We'll be nice as much as we can. But believe you me, it is a spoiler-filled Stranger Things 4 wrap-up. But first, Rogue Matter presents this week. Rogue Matter presents Data Decoded. That's like two things. You get two versions of me, which you can't go wrong. You get myself here, obviously, which is every Wednesday, but then you get myself and Data Guru.
Double feature Dolce.
Yeah, I know. Deanna McFadder. She is the founder of Nachi. Nachi is a data specialist organization. They work with films. Actually, they work with a number of industries to use data to tell a story. It's really she's a qualified expert in the field of data science. And this episode we decode the human interface and robotics concept behind Ironman. Ironman is a 2008 superhero film, which we all know, based in the MCU. It is actually the first film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Following his escape from captivity by a terrorist group, world-famous industrialist and master engineer Tony Stark builds a mechanized suit of armor and becomes the Superman Iron Man. Is it possible? Like, how far away are we from Iron Man? And she gives her insightful take on just where we are. So if you like that, go check out roguematter.com. Everything on there is free. I keep repeating this. You can check us out on Spotify as well too. Since it's a podcast. Rogue Matter basically. So our tagline these days is very exciting, right? Our tagline is if comics were also podcasts, ebooks, and videos.
It's
So we're
a
not just a comic book company. We're doing like everything, but it's all in this like comic book geek space. I didn't come up with that, but I fully support it.
yeah, it's pretty tight.
Mainly because they signed my checks. So I'm like, woohoo! I'll do anything
Pretty
for
much
money.
what I was thinking, but I decided not to say it out loud. I was being discreet, but now it's all blown up. So I guess yeah, money.
Let me
Thanks
ask
for
you
the
a
money.
question. Let me ask you a question, and this is an easy one. What
This is always
can
this is
you
always where we go wrong when you go off script and start asking me random questions.
put yourself back into 2008 Hassan Godwin?
Oh boy.
You just walked out of Ironman. What was your like immediate reaction walking out of that theater?
That felt like a real movie.
Ah,
I'm sure people don't remember this, but prior to Iron Man and the entire MCU
Mhm.
launch, comic book movies were like, "Hey, look, you're lucky you got this in live action, so just suck it up and deal with it."
Yeah.
A lot of the backstory, a lot of the information that was readily available in the comic books was discarded by executives who thought they knew
Mhm.
better, and so it was hit or miss with most of those movies. So I remember feeling that with the opening montage that
Mhm.
explained Tony Stark and Obadiah Stane and all the stuff with with Stark Industries being arms dealers basically.
Mhm.
I'm like, wow, this actually, first of all, this is a lot from the comic book,
Mhm.
and this is actually very comprehensive. Like, it's actually setting us up really well.
Yeah.
And there's really great imagery, and and then of course Jeff Bridges and Robert Downey Jr.
Yep.
Who just carried that first movie across the finish line. I mean, how could you say anything else about at least the acting, the caliber of the actors?
Sure.
So when I walked out of the theater, I was like, wow, that felt like a real movie, like a genuine movie.
Couple of things, a couple of notes for the kiddies out there. Robert Downey Jr., while being a successful actor, had many a run-in with the law prior to Iron Man, and so his career had gone up and down. Right? I mean, it's fair to say his career
Yeah, that's
was thriving in the '80s. It hit a real big snag. So as much as you might sit there 15 years later and be like, or 14 years later and say like, well, it's a no-brainer. Robert Downey Jr., what a great actor and so amazing. Blah blah blah. No, that was a gamble. That was a gamble and a risk.
See, here's the thing. I agree with you
Mhm.
100%, and that was definitely a scuttlebutt. I learned my lesson from Michael Keaton. I never ever again question a casting choice
Yeah.
after Michael Keaton as Batman. I was like, okay, and then after that was reiterated with Heath Ledger as
Yes.
the Joker. So it's like, all right, look, stop asking questions. If these people win the role, they're obviously the right people for the role.
Yep.
And Robert Downey Jr., though he was coming out of his weirdness,
Yeah.
I think he had just done Sherlock Holmes just before that. So people had already embraced him as recovered.
No, I don't think. No, I think Sherlock Holmes was after. Let me see here. Let's do a little googling here,
either it was right before or right after.
and I'm going to say year, so we get it right. Do my searching good. No, 2009. Yeah, so it was the year. It was basically
Okay.
Sherlock Holmes came after a year later because I do remember this because you're now all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's Robert Downey Jr. Like that's he's a go-to.
Right, that's fair.
Thanks to Iron Man.
But he had done a couple of other movies before.
Oh yeah.
Before these two like blockbuster movies where he
Yes.
had kind of returned to form.
Yep.
Sort of.
Yeah.
So, but I never like it. Also, Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, he looked like Tony Stark.
Yeah, I know.
So, I mean, that was like kind of a no-brainer.
Do you know I just typed in by mistake? I typed in discography instead of filmography, and it turns out that he has
albums.
a 2004 album.
Of course,
called
why
The
wouldn't
Futurist.
you? Why would the only people that don't have an album is AGO? But anyway,
It's coming. It's
Yeah.
coming there.
Yeah,
It's getting
okay.
there. We're almost there.
Okay.
Yeah, he actually. Yeah, he is. Wow. Okay, didn't know that. I don't know if I wanted to know that, but that's very exciting. Yes.
A lot of
So,
things we didn't want to know before recording this show. It's just
but
one of the hazards of the job.
I remember my initial impressions of that though was that the CGI for Iron Man was what impressed me just as much as the actual storyline, because I do agree with you. It was like, wow, this is the Iron Man origin story. That's really great. But I mean, you had Spider-Man before that to where, and you had Batman before that to where you figure, okay, an origin story, they tend to stick to the origin story pretty good. But I remember watching Iron Man and I'm like, wow, that's actually
Green Lantern.
Oh, well.
You know, I mean, there are misfires.
That came after though. That came after. Again, you know, as you said, comic book movies.
I didn't say before. I just said
there's definitely misfires. I'm not disagreeing with you. No, I'm not disagreeing with you. There are definitely misfires. But to me, I almost, there were so few comic book movies out at that point, going into 2008. I mean, you had the Batman tree. You had the Christopher Nolan Batman Begins. You didn't have The Dark Knight yet, which was a pretty faithful adaptation of not Batman Year One. Even in fact, it wasn't a faithful adaptation of Year One. It was
Batman Begins wasn't at all.
No, but it was Ra's al Ghul. I mean, there was they mined that from the comics pretty okay. But the Spider-Man movies that came out, they did a nice job of actually sticking to, for the most part,
yeah,
the origin story.
Those were the
Batman.
Those were the comic book movies of that
yes.
day. And Spider-Man 2, I think, Spider-Man 1 definitely, but Spider-Man 2, I think, was the pinnacle at the time.
Yes.
Of comic book, of what comic book movies could actually do. Like they,
right.
It was a blockbuster.
Right.
So that's probably what launched all of this,
right.
all the MCU and everything else that came after it.
Yeah. But I remember walking out of there thinking, my God, they made like that. There was a second Matrix movie that came out where he was fighting, all those Agent Smiths, and it just looked like cheesy CGI.
Yeah,
like
it looked terrible.
It just wasn't very convincing.
Yeah.
And so,
even though you kind of at that time, because at that time things were less rigid at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you knew it wasn't real anyway, right? And a lot of times you would see something that's like, that's not it's not perfectly real, but that looks okay. That's interesting. That's an interesting thing. But that, especially that fight with all those Agent Smiths, was so egregious.
Yes.
That it was like it killed the immersion.
Right.
It's just like, wow, this is just not good.
But
you can't even watch that now. You can't even watch that these days without like having a stroke.
But that's something to me that was so impressive, was just how Iron Man actually, the Iron Man costume, suit, whatever you want to call it. I was like, wow, I couldn't even tell, is it CGI or is it like an actual life-sized Iron Man suit? Like, I don't know. And to this day, I don't know, and I don't want to know. I am so convinced Iron Man is real, and that's all you can ask for, walking out of a comic book movie, that it looked real. It looked like, okay, that it doesn't suspend my disbelief now when I read a comic book and go, well, that could never really happen in movies. And that's what Iron Man did to me. That suit itself was the cherry on top of just what an amazing, start to the MCU. So
yeah, I agree with you.
If you want to learn more about that Iron Man suit and whether or not that Iron Man suit could actually happen, go check out roguematter.com. When we come back next, we're talking Stranger Things 4. Yours truly made it through all 55 hours of those 2 episodes that they managed to put together, and we will discuss it next. Hi guys, Mike Dolce here from the Rogue Wav Podcast. If you like this video, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. It really helps us out. Leave a comment, let us know what you'd like to see in future episodes, and tune in every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, for a brand new episode of the Rogue Wav Podcast.